Hello there Scapers, my name is Xenavilius and welcome to my Cinderbane Gloves review. So Cinderbane Gloves are new Tier 85 hybrid gloves that were released into the game on Monday, the 25th of September, along with the Lost Grove update, which is a hidden island west of the Poison Waste, and along with it came 3 new Slayer monsters, between 104 and 108 Slayer, which can be killed off task, and these are the monsters that drop these new gloves. They are pretty cheap, so you can buy them on the Grand Exchange, but if you're an Iron Man, you will need at least 104 Slayer to be able to kill them and have a chance at obtaining the gloves. So in this video I'm going to answer the question relating to whether it's worth buying these gloves for different situations and how good they are from a quantitative point of view. But first, let's have a look at what they do. So they have a passive effect that applies poison to targets while you wear the gloves. It doesn't affect poison immune targets such as poison immune bosses or Slayer monsters, for example Yakamaru or Nex or Eruts. And the passive effect will work even after you take the gloves off, as long as the gloves have managed to poison your target in the first place and your target hasn't died. So these two are the main points. The third point is to be tested in this video, and that is that if you use any weapon poison potion, the damage modifier for the poison is increased by 5%, and it also gains a chance of triggering the poison effect a few times in a row. Now, first things first, how does this poison effect work? Well, I decided to test that out by going to the Lumbridge dummies with the following action bar, which is fairly generic, and also the following gear, which gave me an ability damage bonus of 1927. So that's an important number to note down. But yeah, so I tested the Cinderbane Gloves for 2 minutes, noted all the poison hits as well as the total number of damage down using rune metrics, and compared that with weapon poison, just normal weapon poison, no pluses. And this is what I got. So there are about 21 to 22 hits, 21 hits of poison in 2 minutes versus 22 hits of the Cinderbane poison in 2 minutes. And using that information and adding all the hits up, this is what I got. As you can see, the numbers are pretty similar. The min and the max are very close together. The average is exactly the same. And the DPM is slightly high for the Cinderbane Gloves, but it's pretty much the same. So yeah, the Cinderbane Gloves are pretty good. If you look at that DPM as well, 4,000 extra damage per minute is actually pretty significant from something that you're wearing. And you can actually use it as a switch as well. But let's not get carried away here, because you need to be able to normalize this. All poison in the game is based on ability damage. It's given as a percentage of your ability damage. So my ability damage here was fairly low. I mean, you could increase it a lot. Ability damage is a sum of your weapon, the arrow or the spell that you use, as well as other effects from offensive boosts such as your necklace, your gloves, your boots, and so on. Oh, and don't forget overloads and offensive prayers as well, which will boost this number as well as your baseline stats for the skill that you're using. So this ability damage 1927 isn't the max is much higher, and you can apply these percentages to the max to work out how much DPM you can get from the poison, normal weapon poison, versus the Cinderbane Gloves. And it's given as a percentage of your ability damage here. So 200% DPM with normal weapon poison, about 210% with Cinderbane Gloves. And if you look at it per hit, the average being about 19%. So what Jagex have advertised is that the normal weapon poison has a range between 13 and 25% of your ability damage. And the Cinderbane Gloves are very close to this. So the Cinderbane Gloves are pretty much the same as weapon poison without actually using weapon poison. And 210% DPM is pretty good. I mean, I only used a sample size of 2 minutes here, so it's not a very accurate figure. And there were only 22 hits as well. Having said that, it's still pretty good. Yeah, so that's about, say, 10 to 11 hits per minute on average. So let's look at Slayer. That's the first part of this video. And there is absolutely no doubt whatsoever that they are perfect for Slayer. They are hybrid, number 1. And number 2, they're tier 85 hybrid gloves, which is the joint highest tier of hybrid gloves in the game, alongside the atrocious rogue gloves from Deathmatch Bounty Hunter. So I would definitely use them for Slayer. But why do I say that? Is there more information to support this? Well, there is. If you look at all the popular Slayer gloves that people use, the reason people use the Slayer gloves I've shown on screen here is because they're non-degradable. That's the main reason people choose a Slayer glove, and the fact that they're hybrid, but that's not necessarily true all the time. And as you can see, the tier 85 Cinderbane gloves are the only degradable of these. Everything else is non-degradable. And they cost 5 mil, but I believe they're dropping in price as well. And they cost about 2.5 to 5 GP per charge to repair based on your smithing level. That is 150k to 300k to repair from scratch. But why would you want to choose the Cinderbane gloves over the others? Well, apart from the special effect, you've also got the stats. They have the same damage bonuses as a tier 70 glove, but for all 3 styles, they have better defense than any of the other gloves. What they lack is a prayer bonus and health bonus, which the atrocious rogue gloves give, but not many people would want to use the atrocious rogue gloves because you need 1800 deathmatch points to get them, so unless you have them and you enjoy doing that, it's unlikely you'll want to do that to buy them. So all in all, if you compare the Cinderbane gloves to the other alternatives for Slayer, Cinderbane gloves are the way to go. As far as Slayer tasks are concerned, most tasks are poisonable, so I would use them. Then some aren't poisonable, such as air roots, so you might want to use different gloves for those. And these gloves are actually pretty incredible because of their ability to poison all your targets if you're fighting multiple targets at once. For example, corrupted workers in the Sophanum Slayer dungeon, all of them will be poisoned at the same time, which means these gloves are incredibly useful in that situation where they are able to deal out a lot more damage than they would be if they were only used for one opposition at a time. Obviously, for like high-level mobs such as rune dragons, for example, or monsters that have a high defense, such as the Lost Grove monsters, you might want to use a specialist glove instead of Cinderbane gloves, or just bring Cinderbane gloves as a switch, because once they apply their poison effect, of course, that will last for 2.5 to 3 minutes before they wear out. So from a bossing point of view, this is the comparison of the different gloves. I'm not going to go into the specific special effects of each of these gloves because that would be far too detailed and take a lot of time. But all in all, where do the Cinderbane gloves sit in the hierarchy of bossing gloves? Well, that's a difficult question to answer. Obviously, they're hybrid, so they have less stats, lower stats than all the specialist gloves. They don't have a prayer bonus, and their armor rating is probably the lowest as well, after the Death Touch bracelet. But what they lack in stats, they make up for in their special effect. They're also pretty cheap compared to some of the other gloves as well. The main competitors for them would be the specialist tier 85 gloves. The mage one hasn't been released yet, but the ranged one is the Nightmare Gauntlets, for which I've done a review video. These are personally my favourite gloves to use for bossing if you're ranging, and the Gloves of Passage, which have a similar effect where you deal increased damage after using a successful Havoc ability. You've also got the tier 80 Dominion Tower gloves, which don't have great stats, but they have special effects which are very useful. You've got the tier 90 gloves, which degrade to dust but have great stats, the best out of all of them, but they don't have a special effect. And you have the tier 90 Death Touch bracelet, which is very expensive, but it doesn't degrade to dust, but it costs a lot to upkeep as well. And the Death Touch bracelet has a special effect whose effectiveness will depend on how much damage you're taking. So for reflect immune bosses, on average it will reflect 3.75% of incoming damage. For non-reflect immune bosses, that will be 7.5% of your incoming damage. So the Death Touch bracelet is only really useful if you're taking a lot of damage in, say, a situation where you're tanking, such as at Virago as a bomb tank or a base tank, or at AOD. The main killer blow for Cinderbane gloves in a bossing scenario is the fact that most bosses, well, not most bosses, but many bosses in the game are immune to poison. One of the few main bosses which isn't immune to poison is Telos, and that's where these gloves will probably be most useful as a switch. So that's a very old debate now. Should switch scape keep expanding and getting out of control, or should that be reduced? Well, that's up to you. What I'm going to give you are the numbers. So, let's have a look at the numbers. Is there any point in bringing Cinderbane gloves to a bossing scenario where you will already be bringing Weapon Poison ++. Well, here are the numbers. So with the same ability damage that I was talking about earlier, 1927, the Cinderbane Gloves along with Weapon Poison ++ have a DPM of 7877 compared to just 5163 for the Poison ++, Weapon Poison ++. That is a huge increase. Another important thing to note is that the Cinderbane Gloves proc a lot more often than normal poison. Normal poison is only meant to proc once every 10 seconds or so, whereas the Cinderbane Gloves have a chance of procking several times in a row if you use Weapon Poison alongside them. So essentially they enhance the effect of any existing Weapon Poison potions you're going to be using. Now, if you convert that into percentages to make it more fair on everyone, doesn't matter how much your base damage is, if you use percentages it'll be fairer to compare. Well, the Cinderbane and the P++ combined will give you 409% DPM, whereas the normal P++ will only give you 268%. They both have a fairly similar average hit of about 33%, as you can see, but the difference is that the Cinderbane, along with the Weapon Poison, hits a lot more frequently. So about 12 times a minute compared to 8 for the Poison P++, which is a 50% increased proc rate. If you compare the best damage dealing combo of the Cinderbane with the Weapon Poison ++ and compare that with just using the normal Cinderbane Gloves, well, the normal Cinderbane Gloves will only give you 210% DPM, and you're pretty much doubling that with both of these put together. So in a bossing scenario, of course you want to use both of them together. So effectively, having Cinderbane Gloves and Weapon Poison gives you a plus 141% ability damage per minute compared to if you were only using Weapon Poison. That is huge. Essentially, you're enhancing your damage per minute by about 50%. That is huge if you think about it. By just having your Cinderbane Gloves as a switch, along with Weapon Poison ++, as you would normally, you are increasing your poison damage by 50% approximately. Remember that these figures are very approximate, and I haven't tested it for hours and hours. I've only tested it for 2 minutes each. So yeah, there's nothing more to say than definitely use these guys. There is no reason why you shouldn't be using them. You can either use them as a switch or as a main set of gloves. I wouldn't use them as a main set of gloves in bossing scenarios because I think there are better gloves to use permanently, such as the Nightmare Gauntlets, for example, or the Gloves of Passage, or even Swift Gloves and Spellcaster Gloves, or even the Death Touch Bracelet. I would use these as a switch along with normal Weapon Poison. Remember though that all this analysis only works for monsters that can be poisoned, and a lot of RuneScape bosses can't be poisoned. So Araxor can't be poisoned, Legions can't be, Yakamaru can't be poisoned, apart from the jellies of course, Virago, Vindicta, both types of necks, and all the God Wars 1 bosses as well. None of these can be poisoned, so that's a bit of a bummer, but it's still pretty awesome that you can use these gloves at some of the other bosses like Telos and QBD and things like that. Especially at Telos, the poison actually carries over between phases 1 to 4. You just need to repoison at the start of P5. So all in all, what would my conclusion be? My conclusion would be to definitely use these for Slayer, no matter what style you're using. When you're bossing and you're fighting a boss that's not immune to poison, bring these as a switch and only use them for a few seconds until it procs, after which you can switch to your main set of gloves and then reuse them after the 2.5 to 3 minutes roughly. Now it can take a little bit of time for them to proc. I mean, the quickest they've procced is a few seconds, the slowest is about 20 seconds, which is pretty bad, but once they proc they are pretty useful. So definitely get these guys. They are one of the best sets of gloves in the game, especially for Slayer and for bossing as a switch. So yeah guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.